You look at all this with expert eyes. So when you learn 48 minutes happened between these two strikes, give us some perspective. Is that amount of time about what you'd expect in a situation like this?
Anna, I think this inquiry into the two so-called survivors and whether it was an illegal order to kill them is at an end. This has disappeared now into a quagmire of politics. No further action will come of it. The investigation is banging on a closed door. However, we're also missing the point that the largest issue going on right now is the War Powers Act. The President of the United States unilaterally has deployed a massive military force of the Caribbean, Air Force B-1, B-52 bombers, an attack submarine, a carrier battle group, a Marine amphib unit, a lot of U.S. Army special operations. And it appears we have the capability now in place to invade or take down the Venezuelan armed forces. Where is the authority? 48 hours, the president has to notify Congress he's intending to conduct military operations. Then at most, he has 60 to 90 days before he must withdraw forces with a concurrent congressional resolution. There is no law here. We're looking at government by decree, government by whim. We're on the verge of a war, unauthorized, not supervised by Congress.
You are right. There are so many layers to this story and so many questions about the authority of the actions this administration is taking. If we're talking about these September 2nd boat strikes, that alone has drawn questions about whether there could be war crimes, which is why I think it's important for us to drill down here. We've now heard from the secretary and lawmakers who, have all now seen this video, and yet we're hearing very different versions or perceptions of that same video evidence. What do you make of that?
Well, look, at face value, it's nonsense that these two individuals who were killed deliberately by strike represented a continuing threat to the United States. It's utter nonsense. So the question is, again, practically speaking, what is going to happen about it going forward? Nothing. The inquiry's over. The admiral has spoken. He said they represented a continuing threat. They could have flipped the boat, which obviously is nonsense. So I think that inquiry is over. But again, when we train a U.S. intelligence officer, we tell them, tell me about an enemy force's capabilities, not their intentions. So as I look at what the U.S. naval power in the Caribbean is up to, it looks as if we have the capability to conduct active combat operations to bring down Maduro in Venezuela, probably to get access to Venezuelan oil. This has nothing to do with the drug trade. The drug production of cocaine is all in Colombia. It's tripled in the last 10 years with no aerial eradication. Venezuela is a transit country, and you're simply not going to use that military power to affect drugs coming in the United States. We're on the verge of war. The president's going to have to use that military force pretty soon.
Secretary Pete Hegseth violated department policy and put troops at risk by using his personal cell phone to share sensitive military information in a group chat.
And this comes as the U.S. military struck another alleged drug smuggling boat in the Pacific Ocean, killing 4 so-called narco-terrorists. Once again, no evidence supporting the accusations about the boat or its passengers were provided by the administration. Also yesterday, a group of congressional leaders heard from Admiral Frank M. Bradley, the commander who oversaw that highly scrutinized September 2nd attack. Those lawmakers also viewed unedited footage of that strike for the first time. Senate Intelligence Committee Chairman Tom Cotton said, quote, he didn't see anything disturbing in that video.
I saw 2 survivors trying to flip a boat loaded with drugs down for the United States, back over so they could stay in the fight. And potentially, given all the context we heard, of other narco-terrorist boats in the area coming to their aid to recover their cargo and recover those narco-terrorists. And just like you would blow up a boat off of the Somali coast or the Yemeni coast, and you'd come back and strike it again if it still had terrorists and it still had explosives or missiles, Admiral Bradley and Secretary Hegseth did exactly what we would expect them to do.
Joining us now, Democratic member of the Armed Services Committee, Senator Elissa Slotkin of Michigan. She was one of the 6 lawmakers who released that video last month, reminding members of the military they can and must refuse illegal orders. So that looking quite prophetic at this point, if it was indeed an illegal order, if it is deemed that ultimately down the road. I'm curious, Senator, your reaction to what you just heard from Tom Cotton there.
Well, Senator Cotton, I saw the video. I did not. It contradicts a number of other reports I've heard from people who were in the room and watched the same video. I think, look, honestly, whether it's this crisis or the Signalgate crisis, the easiest thing to do is just be transparent with the American people. Just come and show your math. You know, if there's a video, let's see it. If there's an explanation and a TikTok that helps us explain this, show it to us. On Signalgate, if we had just had the Secretary of Defense own up to putting people at risk by putting sensitive details out on the open, an open line, at the beginning, we wouldn't be here. But that lack of transparency from the Secretary of Defense continues to hound him and boomerang on him.
Yeah, a lot of precedents that he's setting and not making it easy to sort of have an open mind about his approach to leadership, putting that lightly. I want to pull back on the boat strike from January 2nd to the entire operation. Is it lawful?
You know, I think the thing that many of us have been asking a lot of questions on is, look, I think if you came to the Armed Services Committee and said, we want to have a real conversation about stepping up creative action against traffickers, drug traffickers, there's a lot of us who are, I said openly, I'm ready to have that conversation. There's plenty of times where we haven't done enough over years and years and years against these drug traffickers. But what's gone on now is we have a secret list of organizations that we're now in armed conflict with. We can't get access to that list. Who are we fighting? And then the legal justification for the whole operation is a classified document that even the operators can't see. So it just, as someone who was involved in operations against al-Qaeda and ISIS and helping to target those organizations, there's a standard of just, again, showing your math. This is how we came to this list that's just not being met. So, again, I don't think the principles of the operations, a lot of us would be open to those. It's the way they've gone about it that's completely ham-handed.
And to your point of lack of transparency, let's remember on the Signalgate investigation conducted by the Pentagon Inspector General, Secretary Hegseth refused to even hand over his phone for that. Senator, we've talked to a number of Republicans this week who are sort of struggling, shall we say, to justify the sort of motive, if you will, of these strikes off the coast of Venezuela to prevent drugs, with the pardon of the Honduras president, who, of course, was prosecuted as a head of a drug cartel. And then others have expressed real misgivings about expanding the Venezuela operation, potentially to land strikes, which the president said could come at any time. What conversations are you having with your Senate colleagues about trying to, get in front of that?
Well, certainly if there's an idea that we're going to go start a land war against Venezuela, and just remember, I mean, the military of Venezuela is not comparable to the military of the United States. If we're going to do that, then that should come to Congress, right? And there's legislation right now on authorization of military force, just reminding everyone, per the Constitution, you should come to Congress and have that conversation with the American public, frankly, if we're going to get into another war. But the amount of force that's being brought into the Caribbean and off the coast of Venezuela, I mean, at this point, I heard it's already $1 billion just to move all this force into the area. It certainly is trying to send a signal. So again, when it comes to using force in our name, come to
Donald right here is being stopped by generals and by members of Congress with military experience. Already the entire narrative is shifted. And I do think this has hurt his ability to not only do more of these strikes, although I don't think they're going to fully stop, but to do them without the narrative being in his favor, right? Because now the narrative is against him. Just to clarify, right? Like, the narrative is against him. Before, there seemingly were a lot of people defending this, saying, I don't care what he's doing or whatnot, because he's getting the bad guys, and the bad guys are bringing bad stuff into our country and hurting our communities. We want it stopped. But when it became very clear that this may be a war crime, And they still haven't produced evidence that these people are even bringing the bad stuff. It's hurt their ability to make these strikes without political cost. Before, they were just doing it and there was minimal political cost. Now, it's an international war crime scandal. And you add to that this is going to weaken Trump's effort to start a war in Venezuela. Because he wants to start one to enrich American oil companies and also to distract from his own domestic scandals. Prices are through the roof. He's hoping a war will take your mind off of it. The files are getting opened, at least some of them. He hopes a war will take your mind off of it. But that only works if the war also doesn't create political liabilities. And if it's already being determined by retired generals and by members of Congress who are saying resist illegal orders correctly, then the war right from the start is a political liability. The war only works like it did for Bush if it's popular. You know, invading Iraq under illegal pretenses, doing war crimes, was popular for W. It wouldn't be for Donald Trump.